All right. Hello, everybody. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So as you probably all know by now, snakebite is a category A neglected tropical disease and annually affects millions of people worldwide with respect to envenomings, and causes hundreds of thousands of deaths, as well as cases of permanent morbidity. That means it's up there with other neglected tropical diseases such as dengue, malaria, or rabies, but it is often a lot less neglected than those. The highest burden is in rural areas of the developing world, as you can see here on the right. So at the top, we have the snakebite cases or envenoming cases, and the bottom cases of deaths, although the resolution of that distribution of cases is improving a little bit lately. Although every time somebody does research on it, it seems like the number of cases actually goes up, unfortunately. So there's a lot of underreporting. WHO has a target of reducing the burden of snakebite by 50% by 2030. The reasons why snakebite presents such a big burden across the developing world is multifold. First of all, if we want to direct mitigation and antivenoms and these things to the right places, we need to know where people actually get bitten. But as you just saw on those maps, our understanding of the spatial distribution of snakebite is actually quite poor. Similar with the distribution of venomous snakes, snake ecology, and other things such as geographic variation in venoms, for example. The next problem is that the production of antivenoms is often not profitable for a lot of companies. So antivenom is expensive to produce, and there's not enough demand to make it profitable, which relates back to people often not being able to afford the antivenom, and that creates a negative feedback loop on the affordability of producing it. There's also, or used to be, a lack of quality control. And a lot of antivenoms are not reliable. The efficacy and specificity is often unknown. And it's also really hard to get antivenoms to the right places because most people who get bitten live in very remote areas. WHO is addressing a lot of these issues, and as Dave just explained, there is a lot of work going on quality assessments of antivenoms, for example, and on establishing an antivenom stockpile to promote antivenoms being affordable to the people that need it, but also to create a reliable uptake of antivenoms from producers. As Raphael will be talking about, we're also working on the epidemiology and the healthcare accessibility to deal with the distribution of antivenom. But I'm mostly going to focus on the big knowledge gaps that we have in snake distributions and ecology. So why do we care about snake distributions and ecology? Well, if we want to know where people get bitten, when and why, we need to know how the distributions and activities of humans and snakes overlap, because that's how people get bitten. And this is true at different scales, at macro scales, so at distribution level, where we need to know where snakes occur and where a lot of people live in areas that are suitable for snakes. But it's also true at micro scales. So we need to know how people on a daily basis, use the landscape and how they might use the microhabitats specifically that snakes are using on a daily basis. The other reason why we need to know more about snake distribution and ecology is that snakebite is very different from a lot of other neglected tropical diseases, as in that we don't want to eradicate it. Well, we want to eradicate snakebite, but not the snake, so not the cause. A lot of snakes are actually threatened or listed as threatened by the IUCN. And in that case, it is very, very different from a lot of other zoonotic diseases. There's a lot of range-restricted tropical snakes. They play a crucial role in the environment, and negative attitudes towards them actually hamper conservation, but also hamper snakebite mitigation. So we really need to focus on both the effect of snakes on people, but also the effect of people on snakes. So to deal with these big knowledge gaps, we're actually going through quite a few big projects at the moment at WHO. And the main thing that I'll be focusing on is how we're improving our knowledge of snake distributions, firstly. So the first step that we did was we went through a lot of all the listed medically relevant snake species, and we tried to find additional occurrence records. So as you see on the left here, a lot of species of snakes, despite being so important medically, actually have quite poor distribution data or distribution points, as you can see here. So huge areas, if you look at the pink area, that was the old estimate of where we think this species occurs, but the points are only down here. So there's a huge area where we know the species is, but there isn't really any occurrence records. So we went through a process that I like to call intensive data mining to go through the literature, private databases, public databases to collate and repeatedly vet distribution information. So we have a panel of experts that helps us go through occurrence records and with us vet them, tell us if they know of additional records that we don't have yet, tell us about dubious records and so on. And this is an iterative process, so people don't have to repeat it in the future because we're constantly working on improving this database of occurrence records and constantly talking to experts to improve this. So yeah, as you can see on the left, we have the previous distribution records that we had for 2 species just based on some of the most common public databases. And on the right, you can see the distribution records we have now. So we've made huge progress. And here is another 2 species, an example. And up on the top, you can see this is the Egyptian cobra that infamously killed Cleopatra. And it's incredible how little distribution information we previously had, but now we have quite good coverage across its range. Then we've been using these distribution records to update the distribution maps, so the expert-derived range maps for all species. So on the right here, you can see the distribution of several species that are all part of the Trimerosaurus albolabris complex, which has recently been split into several species. They're still currently listed as one complex, but we have updated the distribution maps for each individual currently recognized species within the complex. There's a lot of work going on with that because, as you can see up here, we now have 281 listings, and that includes 508 species. So that's a lot of work just updating all of these distribution maps. And again, this is an iterative approach where experts have access to these maps, and every time they disagree with something, they can give us more information and we can continuously update them and keep them up to date. And they're accessible online so people can use them. Here on the right, you see another example where a species has been split into several. This is the forest cobra. It used to be 1 species, now it's 5. The next thing that we do once we have all these distribution records, however, is not just update the static yes or no, are they there or not maps, but we also do and create distribution models. These are statistical distribution models using Maxent modeling software. And on the right here, you can see the distribution model for the puff adder. And these distribution models provide a lot of benefits compared to the just the basic maps of presence or absence. Because as you can see, we see that in the north here, for example, there is still low suitability. So you might still expect a few snakes to occur there, but these might not occur, might not be visible in a lot of the other maps because people see the species there that rarely, that it's not necessarily recorded. It also fills in a lot of knowledge gaps. So there's area where a model can predict that it's highly suitable for that species, but we just haven't gone there and looked for it. So now we can check if the model is correct, and we can go there and look for it. And we can estimate where people might get bitten by a snake, even though it hasn't been officially recorded there. It also helps with very data deficient species, such as these 2 here. So you can see our understanding of where they occur was actually quite low, but with a distribution model, we can fill these big knowledge gaps of where we think the species might occur. And again, here is a high elevation, a group of high elevation species. And again, you can see how well the distribution model predicts these high elevation locations. These distribution models are at 1 kilometer resolution, and they're based on not just climate, like a lot of distribution model, but also on vegetation, on topography and land use. So they're quite detailed, high quality models. The other thing that we can do with these distribution models is that we can predict how species ranges will change in the future. So on the right here, you can see for the cottonmouth in North America, red indicates an increase in suitability. So you can see that throughout the range of the species, suitability will likely increase. And that means that abundance will also likely increase. And especially at the northern boundary or northern border of its distribution, habitat suitability is likely to increase a lot. So we might see the species shift further north. And people that live there may have not previously been exposed to snakebite, but they might be in the future. Similarly here, for one of the brown snakes in Australia, the blue outline is where it currently is known to occur. And the blue areas show a decrease in habitat suitability, while the red areas further to the coast show an increase. So we might expect this species to shift further towards the coast and further south in the future. Another thing we can use distribution models for is that a high habitat suitability usually indicates a higher abundance, and has been shown in a lot of cases to actually function well as a proxy of relative abundance. So we can add all of these models together for a group of species. For example, at the bottom right here, you see the cumulative suitability of all big four so the big four snake species in India that cause the most snake bites. And you can see that areas that are very red mean that there is a high suitability for a lot of different species. So you would expect there to be a lot of snake bites if people live in those areas and perform activities that expose them to snake bite. Also on the top, you can see a diversity map. So that just shows how many species co-occur across India. So again, if you wanted to distribute an antivenom, you could check where the antivenom needs to cover all big four species, or where it would be sufficient to use an antivenom that is created against less than all four species. And we can combine these maps in a multitude of different ways. Last but not least, we're also working on a database on species traits that are relevant to snakebite. So we're going to perform an expert elicitation project where we will collect a lot of information that doesn't occur in the literature, so where we don't have data for, just by talking to experts and getting their opinion. But there's a standardized process of doing this in an iterative way where you can narrow down the opinion of experts to get closer to each other and share feedback with them, so that you can get a good understanding of what likely answers to different things are without doing the field work. Of course, in the long term, actual data is better, but since work in remote areas on these snakes is very difficult, this is a great proxy using expert opinion and expertise to fill some of these knowledge gaps until we have actual data. So for this project, we will ask them questions such as what the abundance of certain snake species is likely to be in a habitat where they occur, what their propensity to bite is, what their likelihood of inflicting wet bites rather than dry bites is, and so on. So if you want to be involved in this, please let me know, because we're still looking for additional experts to give us their expertise on this. So here's an example of how we're using these models to actually mitigate snakebite in reality. So on the right here, you see a map that shows the suitability of the landscape for any carpet vipers. So in red is high suitability and green is lower suitability. And knowing where there's likely to be a high abundance of carpet vipers, we can combine this information with other things, such as this map, in which we're showing the percent of the landscape used for agriculture. Agriculture being one of the main activities during which people get bitten by snakes. So if we are in an area where there's a lot of agriculture and a lot of carpet vipers, we would expect to see a lot of carpet viper bites. So by combining these two outputs, we can establish a map that shows risk of exposure to carpet viper bites. Using this, we can then ground truth this, we call it a bottom-up approach because it's more of a mechanistic approach. So we're looking at where you would expect bites to occur. And then we can ground truth it usually using epidemiological data to see how well it fits the reality. And we can use it to distribute antivenoms to the right places. The reason we use ECHOS in this case is that there is actually a WHO approved antivenom currently for ECHOS on the market. So it's a good starting point to use for a pilot project. Here's some other risk maps, however, for other groups of species. So you can see the top left, there's the exposure risk for puff adders across West Africa. And same with spitting cobras, boomslang, and carpet vipers. And we can also add all of these together to get a combined exposure risk from all of these species, or in this case, all category 1 species. So this would be a good map, for example, to use for deciding where to deploy a polyvalent antivenom. However, as I said before, we have an expert elicitation project going that can improve on these maps by giving us additional information on abundance and propensity to bite and so on. So we can actually weight the risk maps for different species, depending on, for example, if one is more likely to bite when encountered, then it would have a higher weight in the final output for risk. Of course, we can also use a top-down approach, so actually model observed epidemiological data using some of these outputs. We're still working on that because data, as I said, is very limited on where people actually get bitten. But on the right here, you can see a preliminary map of data that we've been collecting across Africa, and hopefully that data set will grow in the near future, and we can actually run some correlative models on that as well. There's also many other uses for these snake distribution models. So as some of my colleagues will be talking about, you can use them for combining with healthcare accessibility to find strategic locations for antivenom stockpiling. You can also use it for conservation planning, however. You can use it for education, research on geographic venom variation, and so on. So many, many other things to use it for. And last of all, I would like to draw your attention to the WHO snake database, which Dave already pointed out. So we're trying to combine all this information that we're creating in one database online. The database is already online, and we already have snake distribution information and antivenom information there, but we'll be releasing a new version of the website later this year, and it will include a lot of the other data, such as the epidemiological data and so on. So please go to that and explore that as well. Thank you. And this is the WHO GIS team, of which I am a part. Everybody circled in red is involved in the snakebite project. So you can see there's a lot of people involved. And of course, the NTD team, most of which will be presenting today as well. Thank you.